The first time I heard the words that would scorch my soul more than any insult, I was 12. My father, a man built like a fortress of disappointment, stood over me like a gatekeeper of his expectations. "Look at this," he said, his voice sharp as a blade. "You're wasting your potential. Why would you try something so ridiculous? Your parents won't approve. They won't see the discoveries you'll make." His words lodged in my mind like a stone, heavy and impossible to shake. I remembered the day like a firefight. Standing in the kitchen, my hands trembling, I'd held a tiny, dusty seedling in my palm. A plant, not something that grew in the lab or the library, but one that somehow thrived in the cracks of the old building behind the park. My parents had given up on me then, said I'd never be good enough, that my dreams were just something a toddler with a crayon could do. But dreams, my dad had always said, weren't just for children. They were for those who refused to let the world decide who they were, and I had decided to be different, so I turned my back on the lab. I didn't just start a garden. I became a believer in the power of growth, whether it was in soil or paint. My family called it foolishness, my peers called it a waste of time, but deep down I knew what I was doing. Then came the opportunity. A grant from a local research institute, barely enough to cover my first seed, a chance to test my methods in a controlled environment. My colleagues, skeptical as ever, exchanged glances. "Paint's just ink and canvas," one muttered. "Medicinal plants, that's just old-fashioned." But I wasn't listening. I'd seen the way the sun filtered through the leaves of the city's forgotten spaces, how the soil remembered things it thought was lost. I called it urban botany. If not for their epithets, I'd have never known it yet. Years passed. The grant came. I left the lab, stuffed my wings into a bag, and walked into the city like a man who'd finally found his place. I settled into a cramped apartment above a boutique plant shop on a near-vanished side street. The walls were covered in seedlings, their leaves a riot of green. Their roots poured into the cracked pavement, weaving through iron bars that had once tried to strangle them. But it wasn't just about plants, it was about reclaiming what was lost. What my family saw as pointless, I saw as progress. The first time they invited me in, my hands shook so hard I had to stifle them. They asked questions. "What do you do?" I grow plants," their eyes widened. "But you're not saving people." I nodded even though they couldn't see it. I showed them the soil, the way the plants adapted, the quiet strength in their growth. They didn't understand, but they were curious. Then came the breakthrough. A community health crisis hit the city, a surge in chronic infections that no one knew how to address. My research, born from my own trauma, found a way to neutralize the pathogens. It was a miracle, or so they thought. What made it unforgettable wasn't just the science. It was the way my plants transformed the lives of those around me. A family member struggling with a fever returned after months of bed rest. She tore open her bag, taken one seedling from my shelf. We planted it together, and in days her illness eased. Then another, then a third. Their eyes lit up. "You're a genius," they insisted. But the real moment came the other day. A local epidemiologist walked in, drawn by a flyer. She was a woman in her mid-30s, dressed in a suit too formal for the room. She didn't know my name, but I could see the resolve in her eyes. "You're not just a botanist," she said, her voice steady. "You're a problem solver, a teacher, someone who sees potential where others see despair." She took a seed from one of my plants, held it up, and said, "This is the beginning of something bigger. And it starts with you." In that moment, the walls I had built began to crumble. My family, who had long since stopped listening to me, suddenly saw the man they had known, a man who had been discarded. They arrived at my door that afternoon, their faces etched with confusion and something else, something raw. "Why did you leave us?" my younger brother asked, his voice trembling. I didn't answer that easily. Instead, I sat on the porch, the sun casting long shadows across the lawn. My plants stood tall, their leaves a testament to the power of persistence. I looked at them, and for the first time I saw their purpose. They weren't just plants. They were proof that even the most discarded dreams could take root in the darkest soil, proof that failure was not an end point but a detour. That night, I sat down with my younger sister, who had been quiet for weeks. "Did you know why they laughed at me?" she asked. I paused, the weight of years lifting. "I know why they said I was an embarrassment," I said, "but now I can tell you." She looked at me, eyes wide. "You're not an embarrassment. You're a pioneer." Her words hung in the air. I smiled, the first genuine one in months. Years later, I stood in front of the media, the headline reading, "The botanist who took an useless dream and made it magical asterisk." The crowd roared, their voices echoing the same words I'd once heard. You're an embarrassment, that had carried me through. They had seen the danger in my path, but now they understood. The real test wasn't just about success. It was about survival, about proving that no matter how the world tries to dim your light, you'll always find your way. And that night, wrapped in a coat made of recycled plant fiber, I walked into the city, a man who had once been mocked. Today I carried a seed in my pocket, a reminder that even the most unlikely dreams can bloom. The Karma's ledger was never a sentence, it was a story, and I was its hero.